All right, so for my students out there, just wanted to show you kind of a little bit what's happening in the news and dealing with a little bit of math. So this is a chart of deaths in New York City. And the deaths in New York City, this is starting back in January 1st and going all the way through May 2nd. All right, and the graph is explaining something, and I'm going to talk about what this graph explains and then talk about why they're estimating COVID-19 deaths the way that they are. So New York City is a large city, and with such a large city, you would expect a certain number of people to die every day. And those dying could be dying of diseases or accidents or many different things because New York City is a large city. So the expectation of deaths is this line here. So it's marked at 0. 0 means there's no more deaths than expected, no less deaths than expected. And so this is the expected number of deaths. And as we can see that some days more people die than are expected, and some days less people die than are expected. But the line holds pretty true. Like the expectation is that this estimated number of all-cause excess deaths. So if the line's above the 0, it's more deaths. If it's below, there's less deaths than expected on that day. And it hugs really close to this line for most of the beginning of the year until we get this disease, COVID-19. When COVID-19 comes in, then the death rate starts to go up. So what this represents, this dark blue section down here, is these are COVID-19 confirmed deaths. So these are people that were tested, found out that they had COVID-19, and then they died. And so when scientists and mathematicians were looking at the data, they were recognizing that this is the number of deaths that were actually happening. It's pretty close. The estimate is close to what's happening. You know, you have some days more people die, some days less people die, but it's pretty close. But out here, what was happening was there was this line, the total number of deaths from all different causes, and then this dark blue down here, which is number of COVID-19 deaths. And then there's this big space. That big space is representing all the deaths that happened that there's really no explanation for. We would expect a certain number of people to die because it's a big city. We know that this many people are dying from COVID-19. Why are this many more people dying? And if you're looking at it, I have a ruler here. In between these two spaces, which is 100 deaths, there is about 4 centimeters. All right, you can recognize that as 4 centimeters. So the distance here from the number of COVID-19 deaths all up here is 20 centimeters. So 4 centimeters is 100 deaths. So that's 20 centimeters, that's 5 times as many. So there's 500 deaths that are unexplained on this particular day. And so they went back and they said, how can we model this so it's closer to what's actually happening? Because those 500 extra people didn't die in New York State or New York City just because it was just a weird day and a lot of people died. Probably some of them had COVID-19. So they went back and they said, all right, let's look at the people that had the symptoms of COVID-19 because, you know, tests aren't readily available. Not everyone is getting tested, and some people are dying because of COVID-19 without us counting them. So what New York State did was they went back and they said, we're going to code these certain deaths as COVID-19 probable deaths because looking back on their records, looking back on their charts, looking back on the symptoms that they had, they probably had COVID-19 but just weren't diagnosed. And that's where they add in this light blue section. So now the estimates are closer. Notice, this is still in underrepresentation. Probably somewhere in here, probably some of those people died of COVID-19. It's not likely that just more people just happened to die in New York City on these days just because it was one of those days. There's a pandemic going around here. So the likelihood is that even some of these people that are not being counted did die of COVID-19. So when people say it's unfair, the way that they're counting the COVID-19 deaths by having the doctors go back, right? If you recall, Governor Cuomo from New York State said that they were recounting the way that they were tabulating the COVID-19 deaths to make it more approximate. It's more approximate, but they're still undercounting how many people are probably dying from COVID-19. So this is a mathematical representation. Obviously, scientists are working their best and mathematicians are working their best to try to estimate exactly what's happening, because it's better to have information than to not have information. And I just wanted to share this information with my students. So if you have any questions, let me know. Thanks.